Do you realize now what I was creating?
This can't be true.
John Carpenter and Deborah Hill had a plan after the first two Halloween movies. They wanted to turn the franchise into an anthology series. Every year, a different horror story set around the holiday. No more Michael Myers, just some new stories and new scares. Season of the Witch was supposed to be the start of that. Tom Atkins plays an alcoholic doctor who stumbles onto a conspiracy involving a company selling Halloween masks to kids. The masks are part of something much darker. There's a plot involving androids and ancient pagan rituals and mass sacrifice. It's weird in a way studio horror usually isn't allowed to be. The problem was, the title said Halloween 3. People showed up expecting Michael Myers. When they didn't get him, they felt cheated. The movie bombed opening weekend and Carpenter's anthology idea died right there. The studio brought Myers back for Part 4. But over the next few decades, people started finding Season of the Witch on video and cable. They started realizing it was actually good. The kind of strange, spooky film that feels perfect for October. So now some people say it might actually be the best Halloween sequel. Ken Russell had spent his whole career making films that pissed people off. Blasphemy, sex, imagery that made people walk out. By 1988, he'd been protested and condemned more times than most directors get reviewed. Then he made a horror comedy about a giant snake in rural England, based on a Bram Stoker novel. Stars a very young Hugh Grant and Peter Capaldi years before anyone knew who they were. There's a supernatural conspiracy, hallucinations, people with prosthetic fangs, and eventually a massive practical worm monster that villagers have been sacrificing people to. The movie knows how ridiculous it is. It's funny when it wants to be, creepy when it wants to be. Russell wasn't trying to make anything respectable. He was making the exact film he wanted to make, and if you didn't like it, that was your problem. Zhuvovsky was going through a divorce when he made this, and you can feel it. The movie is a horror film about a marriage falling apart, and it plays like watching someone lose their mind in real time. It's so disturbing, no wonder this movie was banned for 11 years. Sam Neill plays a husband trying to hold his marriage together, and his wife, played by Isabella Gianni, becomes increasingly unstable. The plot goes into supernatural territory, creatures, doppelgangers, stuff that doesn't fully explain itself. But the real horror is watching these two people destroy each other. There's a scene in a subway tunnel that became legendary. Johnny is alone and she just loses it completely. Screaming, convulsing on the ground, there's bodily fluids everywhere. It goes on way longer than you'd expect. It's one of the most disturbing sequences ever put on film. When the film came out, it got a limited release and mostly confused people. Now it's got a cult following. That subway scene is a big part of why. Lucio Fulci made a film about a woman who inherits a Louisiana hotel that might be sitting on top of a gateway to hell. The plot doesn't connect the way you expect American horror to connect. The logic here is more like a nightmare, where things happen because they feel right, not because they make sense. Fulci fills the movie with images that stick with you. Faces getting eaten, eyes getting destroyed, corpses pulling themselves up from underground. All of it done with practical effects. The ending doesn't wrap things up, but that's kind of the whole point. Outside of horror circles, almost nobody knows this movie exists, but it's one of the best Italian horror movies of all time. John Carpenter accidentally made 3 films about the world ending. The Thing, then Prince of Darkness, then In the Mouth of Madness. He didn't plan them as a trilogy, but they all deal with the same thing. Cosmic forces that humans can't fight or understand. Prince of Darkness might be the scariest one, and it's the least known. The setup sounds almost goofy when you describe it. A group of graduate students investigates a mysterious container of liquid in an abandoned monastery. The liquid might be Satan. Carpenter takes that and makes it work. There's a recurring broadcast from the future, grainy footage warning of something terrible coming, and it's one of the most unsettling images he's ever created. You can't get it out of your head. The students slowly figure out they're dealing with something they can't stop, and Carpenter lets that feeling build the whole runtime. There's some dark humor, but it just makes the horror land harder. That broadcast stays with you after the movie ends. The first Prom Night is a pretty forgettable slasher. It had Jamie Lee Curtis and Leslie Nielsen, which got people into theaters, but it never stood out from the pack. Just another 80s slasher doing slasher things. The sequel came out 7 years later, and there was absolutely no reason to think it would be any good. It got mixed reviews, it looked cheap, and it didn't even start out as a prom night movie. The production began as something called The Haunting of Hamilton High, a totally different film. They only rebranded it as a prom night sequel after extensive reshoots. Classic cash grab, right? Except it's not. It's secretly one of the best horror sequels of the 80s. It's this unhinged possession movie that plays like someone smashed The Exorcist into Carrie and then threw Nightmare on Elm Street on top. The kills are memorable, the imagery sticks with you, and it goes places you genuinely don't expect. Michael Ironside shows up and gives it more weight than a movie like this probably deserves. And there's an actress who plays the possessed prom queen, and she's absolutely wild in it. It's the kind of performance that makes you wonder why she didn't have a bigger career after this. The whole thing got dismissed as a cheapy cash-in, and it's actually a legitimately great horror film behind a terrible title. Wes Craven created Freddy Krueger in 1984. One of the most iconic horror villains ever, saved an entire studio from bankruptcy. A few years later, he made Shocker, and it feels like about 10 different movies all smashed together into one insane thing. The premise alone is ridiculous. There's a serial killer who uses black magic to turn himself into living electricity. He can possess people at will. He's hunting a teenager who has a psychic connection to him, and that teenager also has a supernatural link to his dead girlfriend, who appears to him as a ghost. The climax has the characters chasing each other through television broadcasts, jumping in and out of different channels. Shocker never got the love that Nightmare on Elm Street did, and it's pretty obvious why. It's way messier and weirder, but that's also what makes it worth watching. Dario Argento made Suspiria in 1977, and it was a masterpiece. A surprise hit, the film that put him on the map internationally. So naturally, everyone was waiting to see what he'd do next. What he did was Inferno, the second film in his Three Mothers trilogy. And it got a botched North American release, mixed reviews, and basically got ignored for decades. The third film in the trilogy didn't come out until 2007. That's how badly things went off the rails after Inferno underperformed. Which is a shame, because Inferno is Argento at his most visually stunning. It's a supernatural tale of murder and witchcraft, but Argento basically threw out plot and character entirely. The dialogue doesn't matter, the story doesn't track. What you get instead is pure mood and pure vibes. Some people bounced off that pretty hard when it came out, but it's definitely one of the most beautiful horror films of the 80s. Stuart Gordon made Reanimator in 1985 with Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. It was the kind of movie where you can't believe they got away with half of what's on screen, so the very next year, Gordon got the same team back together and decided to push even further. The premise is that a group of scientists build a machine that stimulates the pineal gland, which opens access to a parallel dimension. The creatures in that dimension are violently carnal, eager to absorb anyone who wanders in. When the lead scientist gets transformed by this alternate reality and comes back, he's this impossibly revolting, wet, mutated monster, and he wants to drag everyone else into his vision of grotesque enlightenment. The film isn't scary in the traditional sense. What it is committed. It has some of the most memorable creature work in horror history, the kind of tactile, physical grossness that doesn't really get made anymore. It's very physical and disgusting in a way that CGI can't replicate. If you enjoy feeling absolutely sick to your stomach while watching a movie, Society is for you. Brian Usna was the producer behind Reanimator. In 1989, he directed his first film and he teamed up with an effects artist who goes by the name Screaming Mad George. The setup sounds almost quaint. There's a teenager named Bill Whitney living in Beverly Hills who starts to feel uneasy about his wealthy family. Something seems off. He begins to suspect they might be involved in some kind of freaky sex murder cult. Classic paranoid horror premise, nothing you haven't seen before. And then the climax happens. They put together one of the most stomach-churning sequences in the history of body horror. It involves the wealthy elite doing things with their bodies that will genuinely make you feel sick. A first-time director and an effects artist made one of the smartest horror films of the decade, and most people have never seen it.